Welcome to FEM TV, where we have hot times in Houston with some really cool people. The Republican National Convention is in town, and that's attracting the attention of a lot of different groups and individuals. TARAL's here, NARAL, NOW, ACT UP, GAG, WAC, you name it, they're probably here. So we're going to interview Patricia Ireland, we're going to cover the clinic defense, and get some interviews with some other national leaders who are in town this week. Patricia Ireland, National President of NOW.
Hi, Patricia. What would you say about the women's movement today? Is it currently active, and if so, is it growing, or what's the status of it?
I think the movement is more active and more dynamic than we've seen it in years. It really started with the Webster decision on abortion rights, but it mushroomed and skyrocketed in terms of the activism around Anita Hill's confrontation with Clarence Thomas, and so many women seeing that and recognizing in a very visceral way what it means that women have been so totally excluded from power in this country at the highest levels, in government, in the private sector as well. So we're seeing extraordinary activism. Armchair supporters who have long been with us on the issues are actively involved now. Young women are seeing not only the issues of abortion rights, but of sexual harassment, of date rape and violence against women on their campuses, of body image, in the eating disorders that come from the stereotyping of what a woman should look like. I'm encouraged. I'm very excited about this coming period.
How do you compare the movement to the 60s and 70s?
Well, in the 60s and 70s, we had far fewer resources. We had far fewer supporters. When I became active in the movement, we had only about 40% of the women in the country who said they supported a women's rights movement. In the latest poll that Time and CNN reported, that Gallup did late last year, 78%, that is nearly 4 out of 5 women, said they were supporters of the women's rights movement. 20% said they were strong supporters of the movement. And that means we've got women's rights supporters moving into positions of power, albeit bunched up against the glass ceiling in many cases, but moving into positions of power in all of the institutions that shape society: law, medicine, media, education, religion, as well as government. It's a resource that we need to tap. All of those women who are out there as role models and mentors, but who can also help us in shaping the institutions in which they're working and in helping us build the movement to be ever more strong.
Do you think younger women are more conservative today? I know you said that you think they're becoming more active, but do you think it's just now occurring? What do you think happened in the few years just past? Why weren't they then?
I think a lot of us have said that feminism is often something that women come to later in life. I don't mean very late in life, but your first divorce when you get left with the children and no child support, the first job promotion that you can see so clearly you deserved and went to some man that you trained, the leering boss, the crude colleague who harassed you sexually, the domestic violence, the battery that you may face in your own home. I think that those kinds of experiences in women's life often come a little later and tend to make the feminist movement one that we get more radical as we get older. What is encouraging to me is that so many of the young women in their 20s are now very active. They're very confident, and they see in a way that perhaps their peers who are a decade older, the women in their 30s, who may have thought that it was all taken care of, that everything had been accomplished. We'd passed all these great laws. They are now out into the world and experiencing the discrimination that means, as so many of us, we don't have theoretical conversions. We've become active because we've faced discrimination. And they're being joined at a much younger age by the women who are still in college or just out of high school, who get it because they've seen that the government's trying to take these rights back.
The abortion issue seems to be the hottest issue right now for the women's movement. What do you think, if not for the abortion issue, would be the most primary concern for us? And what will be once this is all out of the way and it goes the way we want it?
Well, I think that we can't just talk about abortion, although that is an emergency and high visibility and galvanizing issue. But even in that context, we need to look at reproductive freedom generally. We're seeing a renewed attack on the rights of young women and poor women with so-called welfare reform laws penalizing poor women implying that poor women can't make decisions for themselves, and indeed blaming poor women for the economic mess that the country is in. I think that those issues of economic empowerment are particularly important to women. They are a vehicle to greater freedom. And so when we talk about a right to choose, we have to talk about a right to choose realistically to have our children and our families and be able to support our families and keep our heads above water. So that I would say that ranging in issues from sexual harassment and other forms of job discrimination to family and medical leave and child care and health care, all of the things that we need money for, and many of the things that the government should be providing in the same way we provide public education. I would say also that women's health is of high priority. It's underfunded, it's under-researched, and for far too many of us, the greatest threat to our health is the violence we face in our own homes. And I think women's personal integrity, physical integrity, not to be harassed, not to be battered, not to be sexually assaulted is high on our agenda. All of that is accomplished through political empowerment. And so if I were to pick one key focus in 1992 and beyond, it would be moving more women into positions of political power, being at the table when the policy decisions are made and having our views represented. If we learned nothing else from the confrontation between Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill and his being seated on the court, it was that no one will represent women's interests the way we will represent ourselves. And so I would say let's get more women in positions of power everywhere.
What is your impression of the women in Houston as far as feminist causes go?
I'm very high on the women in Houston. I can't tell you what a wonderful community I have found this to be. It's a community right now that is galvanized by the impending threats from Operation Rescue, and is well organized, perhaps in a way that it hasn't been for a number of years, where groups who've been doing specific types of work on one issue or another are drawn together, so that when I come here to Houston, I get to see in a very short 2-week visit a whole community of active and exciting and involved women. I'm really pleased by what I see here. I think that the Operation Rescue folks thought that this was a conservative community and they'd have fertile ground, and I think they're very surprised by what they're finding. I myself am pleased by what I'm finding.
Well, we're very pleased that you think that, and very pleased that you're here with us during this time. Thank you.
Whatever things you bring them in some sort of a waste pouch or some container that does not require that your hands hold on to it. You don't want a little purse in your hands. You don't want a backpack, because when you turn with a backpack, you hit people with it. Unintentionally, I'm sure.
This is one of the many clinic defense orientation sessions being held before the Republican National Convention in Houston. 8 months ago, the Houston area chapter of NOW, the National Organization for Women, began preparing for assaults from anti-choice activists. 5 months ago, the Houston Defending Choice Coalition was formed. This coalition consists of local chapters of NOW, National NOW, Planned Parenthood, the Fund for the Feminist Majority, WAVE, which is Women Against Violence Everywhere, and several other groups. Planned Parenthood has conducted about 14 training sessions, and NOW has also conducted 14 general orientation sessions and numerous other specialists and facilitator meetings. The actual number of people trained is not being revealed, but at mass training sessions such as these, hundreds of people are in attendance. Houstonians are mobilizing to protect women from brutal assaults from anti-choice activists, and volunteers are coming from across Texas and from different parts of the United States to join in Houston's clinic defense. The West Loop Clinic, August 15th, 11 a.m. Clinic defenders put their training into action. Fortunately, because of a ruling by State District Judge Eileen O'Neill, the Operation Rescue people were required to stay at least 100 feet away from the clinic. Houston police kept a close eye on the proceedings, making sure the street stayed clear. Saturday, August 15th, 3 to 7 p.m. Just outside the Astrodome, the National Organization for Women held a rally for choice where the crowd heard speeches by local, state, and national leaders and music by singers, guitar players, and the WAC drum corps.
Women's Action Coalition is a group of women that have formed a direct action group to address issues that are affecting the country, not just specific issues, but issues like AIDS, healthcare, child support. It started about January 1992 in New York from St. John's rape trial. They were very concerned about violence that was affecting women and decided they wanted to do something direct action because other groups weren't doing it. And so they formed this group. What we've got here today at this action is the drum corps. We've got in New York over 3,000 members of WAC, and we're forming a Houston WAC right now. And some of these members are Houston WAC members.
What other examples of action
have we done?
Yeah.
During Mother's Day in New York, they held a banner over the Grand Central Station that explained how much money, child support, we do not have. And the action was directed towards those people that are commuting that are not paying their child support. They've done actions during the Democratic National Convention. We marched in front of all the delegates that were viewing all the museums, just to get them to know that women are watching and women make a difference in their vote, and that we're angry that these things aren't being addressed. There are WAC chapters now in San Francisco, in Nashville, and various other places.
One of the high points of the rally was a speech by Urvashi Vaid, Executive Director of the National Lesbian and Gay Task Force.
On behalf of 25 million lesbian and gay Americans, I stand before you to state that full equality and freedom is non-negotiable. That a woman's right to control her sexual and reproductive life is non-negotiable. And no one, not the church, not the state, and certainly not cowardly politicians who bend whichever way the wind blows like George Bush, will ever take away from the women of this land the power to determine our lives. I'm proud to stand before you as an out, avowed, proud lesbian because my presence here represents one historically unacknowledged fact. The fact that lesbians and gay men have been marching, lobbying, and voting for reproductive freedom and choice for decades. In fact, I want everyone who's lesbian, gay, or bisexual who can hear me to raise your hands right now. Keep them up, keep them up. I want everyone who has a family member, a friend, or someone you love who's gay, lesbian, or bisexual to raise your hand right now. Keep it up. Now I want everyone who can hear me, who believes in equal justice under the law, in the human dignity and fundamental humanity of all people, regardless of sexual orientation, to raise your hands. All right. Hello, hello. Where have you people been all my life? Thank you. What brings us all to Houston today is our commitment to the principle that women have the right to control our wombs and our lives. And I want to point out to you some implications of reproductive freedom for gay men and lesbians. Reproductive freedom means not just the right to an abortion, but the principle of individual freedom from government control. Reproductive freedom encompasses the struggle of gay and lesbian parents face in this country to keep custody of our own children, to have access to adoption and foster care, to be judged by our merit as parents and not by our sexual orientation. Reproductive freedom encompasses our struggle to eradicate laws that criminalize our sexuality, such as the Texas sodomy law. Shame, Texas. Fundamentally, actually, the issue that we rally here for today isn't even reproductive freedom. It's an issue of power. And we're here this week in Houston to say very clearly to George Bush and the Republican Party that the pro-choice vote has the power to defeat you this fall. morality. We who are lesbian and gay in this crowd know what I'm talking about, really, and you who are feminists and pro-choice know what I'm talking about. We're called immoral by the Christo-fascists who dominate the Republican Party today. We who are feminists are called immoral women. We who are gay are called sinners. We who are black, Latino, Asian, or people of color are called immoral because we live in single-family households, because we are sometimes poor, because we are different. Well, I want everyone here to understand one fact. Morality has no gender, morality has no race, and morality has no sexual orientation. Morality, my friends, is not the monopoly of anyone wearing a collar. Morality is measured not by rhetorical flourish or language, but measured by the output of good deeds and good work being done by so many of you and by our allies all over this country who are working every day to address the pressing problems our communities face. I want to ask you, who is immoral? Is it lesbian activist Karen Thompson, who fought for 7 years to gain custody of her disabled partner in life? It wasn't Karen who's immoral, but it's President George Bush who denounces gay and lesbian families as unnatural. Who is immoral? Is it the millions of lesbians and gay men, you straight allies, we who have built and funded and paid for the AIDS service organizations in this country while our government does nothing? Or is it Patrick Buchanan who says gay men are to blame for the epidemic we suffer? Shame. Who is a sinner? Is it President Bush? Isn't it President Bush who has presided over 2 administrations that have failed to lead us while more than 150,000 people with HIV disease have died in this country alone? We gather at this convention, my friends, as witnesses to a powerful moment in the history of our time. This is a moment that offers us a clear and present choice. You can call it a choice between justice and immorality. You can call it a choice between the status quo and something really different. Or you can call it a choice between good and evil. Because on one side are all of us and our families and friends and colleagues all over this country. All of us who represent a pro-choice, pro-human, compassionate, just and freedom-loving alternative. All of us who believe that the government's job is to minister to the health and welfare of all its people. On the other side are the people who are running that party. On the other side are the forces that run this country today, the forces of cynicism and danger, who say they will do anything to win, anything to keep their power. Believe you me, they will stoop to anything. The forces of evil that shut their eyes and ears to the lives of the poor and the disenfranchised. The forces of evil that have no idea that family means people who care about each other and love each other, not a patriarch who's served by a mom in an apron baking cookies. Let us remember, my friends, when times look bleak, that when we are united, we are not the minority, but together we are the majority. Let us remember when we see horrible court decisions returned by judges who have sold their souls for their jobs, that we have the power to disobey, to overturn, and to challenge and change any unjust law. Let us remember when times are bleak that this quilt that we make across the divisive and loaded and manipulated lines of gender and race, class and sexual orientation, geography and ability and so on, that this community of people that we make are the face of true morality. The The choice is ours. The power to change is in our hands. Thank you for being here.
We're in Market Square in downtown Houston, where August 17th, 18th, and 19th, the Women's Action Coalition is holding a multimedia event. They projected images of women on a downtown building, and will have an open mic for all who wish to speak.
More women than men vote in this country, and we haven't seemed to be doing much difference. But tonight we will. We're going to give you a chance to speak out and tell us what your feelings are, what your solutions are, and possibly how we can make a difference. And use our votes that should and will make a difference.
First of all, what's a family? You know, I mean, I have a family of origin and I have a family of choice.
Una familia es un grupo de personas que se necesitan, que se van a ayudar y que pueden florecer. Eso es una familia.
The family values that Dan Quayle is talking about is really sort of a memory of a family. He's just talking about the past.
Quayle's family values are his particular family's values. He's concerned about his family. That's who he's interested in.
A family is the group of people, or even just one person around you, who supports you in your life, especially nowadays. The definition of family is kind of different.
A family could just be a woman and a child, or two women together. I mean, that's a family. Yeah, I'm a lesbian, but I also have a child.
One thing my godmother always says is it takes a village to raise a family, which is an African proverb.
And we're about to explode like a volcano. They came so far, and then for what?
Women have been fighting and fighting and fighting. So if you just look at the way things are, I mean, the environment's falling to pieces, and people are just fighting, and it's just, I think everything needs to be changed.
When a woman says something about something, it's sort of taken within a certain menu and listened to and all. But I think when it sort of comes out from a man, it's considered much more serious.
I think my opportunities would be a lot more open to me if I were a man.
I've come to this point at the age of 24 where I feel like I've been beaten down. My confidence has been beaten down so much.
I feel that women should be heard.
Kathy Spiller from the Fund for the Feminist Majority.
Women's rights and women's lives had never been in greater danger. And we're fighting back. We're fighting back every day on abortion rights in front of the clinics here in Houston. And I hope that all of you are going to join us. We're showing what we can do when women take direct action to defend our rights. And every day we're outnumbering the Operation Rescue bullies, and we're keeping the clinics open. We're having to fight back because in the halls of Congress and in the Supreme Court, women's rights to abortion are under attack. And they're under attack because we as women have no vote on whether abortion will remain safe and legal. We have one token woman on the United States Supreme Court. We're only 5% of the members of the United States Congress. So when abortion rights bills come up for vote, the people who are most directly impacted don't even have a place at the table. We've got to vote for feminist women who are running for elected office. And more importantly, in 2 years, some of us have got to run. More must run if we're to win. If more don't run, we'll never see equality for women in our lifetimes. So join us on the front lines in the fight for abortion rights here in Houston. Join us at the clinics, and join us as we fight to elect more women and run yourselves. Thank you.
Patricia Ireland.
1992 is the time for our Elect Women for a Change campaign. Fortunately, we have the resources. We have more energy than ever before. The feminist movement is in a real resurgence. There's an irony. When we're screwed, we multiply. Now, one of the reasons we want more women in office is we think that women candidates are more honest, and I have to be honest with you. 1992 is not the year of the woman. It is the beginning. It is the kickoff. I mean, after all, don't we get more than a year? The guys had the first 200. So from here on, we're not going to talk about 1992 as the year of the woman. This is the beginning of the era of women. Thank you.
Another event taking place in Houston during Convention Week is a town meeting sponsored by the National Lesbian and Gay Task Force and the Gay Men's Health Crisis. This panel discussion will bring together national and local leaders, community activists, and citizens. It is held August 19th at the Unitarian Universalist Church on Fannin and will focus on the role and power of gay men and lesbians in the 1992 presidential election.
We have to name that vision, that looking in the rearview mirror that I was talking about. Then we have to name our vision, which is a harder vision, which is to establish a country, to establish a place where everybody gets included. And we have no role, we have no model for that. We have to do it for the first time. When their racism and sexism and homophobia unites them, it also divides us. We have to make sure that we are not divided by racism, sexism, and homophobia. We have to name these people for what they are, that they are a fundamental threat to democracy, that they will dismantle what little we know of democracy in this country, and they will trample upon it. And we have to ask people, are they willing to give up control of their lives and their communities to a religious jihad? We have to pose that question. We have to pose the question of who is going to make decisions for all of us. Those who preach condemnation and exclusion are those of us who represent a wide range of differences and inclusion. We're going to have to talk about morality, and we're going to have to take the high road that we already walk upon, and we have to name that high road, and we have to be proud of that high road. And that high road is this. It's the high road of participatory democracy in which the minority voice has to be heard. It's the high road of liberation. It's the high road of control of one's body and one's life. It's the high road of having the right to be whole. It's the high road of justice.
There's nothing that can compare with that. I think the final thing that we have to remember, and this is a piece that Urvashi was giving us about participation, I think you have to understand, and you have seen it here at this convention, you have seen us out on the line, you have seen them turn the police on us, you've seen them turn their horses to trample us down, you've seen them come out in riot gear. Why? Because we have become threatening. Well, because we have said, we will not be excluded from justice. We will not be excluded from participation. We will not be excluded from liberation. We have said to them, many of us who are women, many of us who are lesbian and gay men, many of us who are people of color, we have crossed the line. And you need to know that. We have crossed the line, and we are truly at a place in which we say, no justice, no peace.
I have been beaten in Chicago, in Philadelphia, in Washington, and in Kansas City for trying to get my government to address the fact that my friends are dying and they are dead. There's a boxcar out there. And sir, if you think I'm going to get on that boxcar and ride quietly to the Dachau that they're setting up, you're wrong. I'm not going to go quietly into that gentle night. I'm going to scream at the top of my lungs until they recognize the fact that 150,000 Americans are dead. George Bush, Ronald Reagan, they did nothing to help us. Thank you.
I've been participating in the abortion claim defense for the past 2 weeks. I think that we can reconcile both sides, the anger and the pain, by realizing that if we stand for a cause that may not be directly our cause, a principle that maybe we understand and sympathize with, but isn't directly a gay issue, that we can show by being there in the morning and staying there and just talking to people and showing them that we have a human face, we have emotions, that we have partners and marriages and feelings and loves and families just like other people, that they won't be so afraid. Because what we have to counter is fear. We have to show them that if they get taken up, if they get beaten, if they get arrested, that we can stand by them too. I know that we have our own causes, and you may not be able to spend any time doing something like that. Maybe the only thing you can do is when someone says a racist comment or racist joke, to say, I don't believe that. I think you're wrong. I think you're afraid of something that you don't need to be afraid of. I know a black person. I know a Hispanic. I know a handicapped person. And they're just like me. Thanks.
But I really feel very moved, and I don't know if it's the exhaustion of not having any sleep and the intensity of the emotions that I feel, but I feel very moved by a lot of what people have said tonight and inspired to go on. I appreciate your courage in standing up and saying something that disagrees with some of what we said. I appreciate Jim's standing up and saying that he doesn't think the task force strategy is right. I think that kind of disagreement is what you're talking about when you say dissent. And it's so different from trashing. That kind of disagreement exists in our community, and it's okay, because here we are under the same house, still, and committed still to working together. I want to leave us with some observations. As somebody who lives in the vortex of evil, Washington, D.C., and not in this city, Houston over the years. You have a rich history in the gay liberation movement here in Houston. The 80s were incredible times for this community. The caucus was one of the finest organizations, the Houston Gay Lesbian Political Caucus, in the country, second to none in the organizing and the advocacy work you were doing. There's a long tradition of fierce activism embodied by people like Ray Hill here and Pokey Anderson and Anise. And there's a new tradition from people like Paul and the other activists. And what I heard about Houston and what I have seen in my 3 different visits here so far, I came here in January, came here in February, and I've been here all week, and I'll be back again, and again. But what I see, I tell you folks, you have a very, very strong and rich and interesting community. You have so much depth here in the gay and lesbian community. You have all the elements to, and I do agree with Jack, I agree with you that this last year is like a rebirth, a renaissance of the gay liberation movement in Houston. I really want to leave you with that outsider's perspective of hope, because I've heard a lot of negative things over the last visits. Oh, I tell you, Urvashi, these people down here, they don't want to get involved. Well, 2,000 people were at that demonstration on Monday night, and I want to tell you, they weren't from outside of Houston. The majority for you all was local people who made up the ranks, local people whose anger is reaching a boiling point and whose desire for being involved is so great right now because of all the things that we talked about and because of the context. So I really, really want to encourage every single one of you, There are 2 organizations up here that live here and work here, and there are many more represented in the room. But I want to talk about these 2 because they are, the national organizations, local allies, and arms. And Queer Nation meets every Tuesday night at 7:30. The next meeting of the Houston Caucus is September 2nd at 7:30.
First Wednesday of every month.
The first Wednesday of every month. I should know. I put the message on the machine. And please come and get involved. There is a role for every single voice in this room. There is a role, whether it's stuffing the envelopes or answering the phone. You have a community that has a tremendous amount of work ahead of it on the violence front, on non-discrimination front, to change policies and regulations and laws, on the sodomy law front at the state level, on the parent and domestic partnership front, and on the AIDS front. You've got a community that has a lot of work to do. And each of us has a role, so I'm proud. I want to thank you. I want to thank you profoundly, the Houston community. You've made it an extremely powerful week, and what has happened here, this is not, it's been the site of a national event, namely the Republican Convention, but it's also been the site of something, of a defining moment for the gay and lesbian movement. This is a defining moment in our history. We have the back, I've been singing that Dylan song all week, battle lines are being drawn. That's what's happening right here in your town. And let's all work together, whatever our vision is of what we need to achieve and whatever our ways are of getting there. We've got a role to play in our movement. I thank you very much, very, very much. I'm very proud to be a lesbian and part of our movement. All right.
We're with Urvashi Vaid, Executive Director of the National Lesbian and Gay Task Force. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us about some of the activities you've been involved in this week in Houston during the Republican National Convention.
Well, it's been a real active week. We've done a range of press conferences, protests, and media outreach and community meetings. The week has, for example, we did a press conference that laid out the gay and lesbian movement's agenda and why we fight for civil rights, what discrimination we face, and talked a little bit about the experience we've had in trying to get the Republican Party to deal with the gay and lesbian community and our problems. We had another press conference that featured mothers' voices against AIDS, which and it was a very powerful press conference, which featured several mothers from around the country who have kids who are struggling with AIDS, from babies to a young man to a young woman, both heterosexual and gay, because AIDS is not limited to people's sexual orientation. AIDS affects all sorts of people, and it's a real myth to see it as a disease of one particular segment. It's a disease, not an orientation. And anyway, the mothers spoke very powerfully about what they think the federal government needs to do, what more we need from our political leaders. I've been profoundly moved is the word that I've been feeling all day by what has happened this week. The gay community has become the target of an outright assault by elements of the Republican Party and by George Bush himself. This is a calculated political strategy on the part of the Bush campaign to win his re-election. He is trying to win on the backs of anti-gay prejudice. I think that's wrong. And I don't just think that's wrong because I'm a lesbian. I think that's wrong because I think it's an immoral and hateful strategy. I don't want a president who panders to hate. I don't mind if my president disagrees with me. That's not the issue here. It's not about disagreement. It's about pandering to the worst elements of intolerance and prejudice and bigotry in our society. I'm scared by what this gay bashing, this verbal gay bashing means is physical gay bashing in the street. It lends sanction to it. It legitimizes it. And that's one thing we've seen this whole week, and we're troubled by it. And we're going to call it, we're going to name it, and we're going to challenge it from every forum we can between now and the election, because we have to. The second thing that I'm alarmed by is the lack of respect and focus to what this AIDS health crisis means to this country. People need to understand that the gay community is motivated and angry and out in the street demonstrating because we have been so profoundly affected by this health crisis in this country. Internationally, AIDS is a heterosexual disease, actually. Internationally, AIDS affects women much more than men. And even in this country, the fastest new incidence of HIV infection is happening among heterosexual women. They're the highest. Women are the highest rising numbers of new AIDS cases in this country. At the percentage growth is the highest. And yet what I'm saying doesn't contradict that. What I'm saying is that in this country, the gay community has been profoundly affected. Now, I have lost too many people to this disease. Dear friends of mine, dear colleagues, incredible leaders, and I've had enough. And I'm not going to put up with George Bush's stonewalling. And that's what that march on Monday was about. People who've had enough of stonewalling and know we can't spend more, but they find money for any little pork barrel project in the congressperson or member's district, and they find money for B-2 bombers, and they find money for all sorts of projects, but they will not adopt the fight against AIDS as a national priority. It's a lie what the Bush administration is saying about AIDS, that they're doing enough. It's an outright lie. The Independent National Commission on AIDS said as much a couple of weeks ago when they issued a press release challenging the president's. He appointed half those people, and they stood up and said, you're wrong.
In addition to AIDS, what are some of the other primary concerns of your organization?
A couple of concerns that are important to us are ending discrimination based on sexual orientation. We don't want special rights. That's never what the gay and lesbian movement has advocated. We want equal rights. We want equal justice under the law. We would like to not be fired from our jobs for being who we are, and we would like to live in peace alongside the rest of society. That is what we want. And And the other piece of what we want, which is going to be frankly harder to get, is respect. I don't think that's so outrageous or outlandish, but I think it's going to be harder to get because there's a lot of disagreement in society, there's a lot of tension, people have a lot of conflict about how to deal with sexuality in this society, and there's a lot of disagreeing, opposing viewpoints. Now, I believe in democracy, and I believe passionately in it. I believe in the Constitution of this country, and so I respect people who disagree with me. Or try to, even when it's hard to. I really try. And I don't get that same respect from the delegates at this convention. We certainly haven't gotten that respect from the president. We have not gotten that respect from the fundamentalist far right. I think it's shameful that these people call themselves Christians and use the power of that authority, of that respect that is accorded to religious leaders in this country. They use that. They abuse that, in my opinion, when they go out and bash and defame and spread lies about gay people. You cannot condemn a whole class of people in the way that they do without lying. I am not condemning the whole class of fundamentalists. I think there are people out there who legitimately, genuinely, in all sincerity disagree. And, you know, okay, but we live in a pluralistic society. And I believe in it, and I'm committed to it, and that's what I'm fighting for. I'm fighting for the space to live my life freely and in peace. Now, to some people, that's a threat. To some people, that very act of allowing me to live as an open lesbian, allowing me to work as a lawyer as an open lesbian, is threatening. I don't think, you know, I think that's the fundamental tension that we're going to have to resolve over the next 4 or 5 years in this country.
What are some of the things that local citizens can do to further the cause of the task force?
Houston is a very dynamic gay and lesbian community. You've got a lot of exciting organizations that are service organizations, AIDS organizations, youth organizations, community service groups that people can get involved with. There are also a couple of different political organizations that I would strongly urge people to get involved with at the local level. Our movement is driven by volunteer love and volunteer energy. We are not deep pocket multinational corporations. We are not as well funded as our opponents. Believe me. And so people can get involved with the Houston Gay and Lesbian Political Caucus, which meets on a regular basis. People can get involved with the Queer Nation Houston chapter, if that's a strategy that they're comfortable with. It doesn't matter which strategy you choose. They're all okay. You have to find a place for yourself in your community and get involved. That's my message to everybody that I've been speaking to here in Houston. Take responsibility, because wake up. Gay people need to wake up to what's happening in this town and in this country. This is a defining moment for gay and lesbian people in this country, what's happening at this convention. For the first time in American history, a major political party is engaging in massive gay bashing. For the first time in American history, they are saying they are going to use this issue to win a presidential election campaign. And it's hateful and it's spiteful. It's wrong.
Thank you, Urvashi Vaid, and all the other dedicated individuals who made their voices heard during the Republican National Convention in Houston. That pretty well wraps up Convention Week. There was a lot of activity here this third week in August. A lot of energy was generated. A lot of issues were raised. We tip our hats to the many groups and individuals who exercised their freedom of speech and their freedom to assemble. Here's to the squeaky wheel, and until next time, this is FemTV wishing you peace, unity, and power. So long.